That's me on Therapy Talks with Shelby.
Hannah, what would be the benefit of this death retreat?
Oh, I don't know. It just looked really interesting, so I sent it to you.
Okay.
I think it's in Canada.
A death retreat?
It's the last link.
Click on the third link that I've sent.
Yeah, in Discord. It's the last one that she sent.
Now I have to go into it.
This is the one that I actually would like to go to the most.
Where's
Not
this
the death
one?
one.
Oh, okay.
The death one I think is in Canada. Or
Okay.
it says global, but then the thing
school.
says something Canada.
Yeah, there's a tour at the National Gallery of Canada, so
this is the one I would like to go to. This is in Iceland.
Interesting. Why?
Because I need to get out of this country.
Fair.
Be an artist in the woods somewhere.
But it's cold
but I was
in
just
the
telling
Arctic.
Shannon that I don't know that I'm I don't know that I'm weird enough to go to any of these. I know I'm weird in our friend group. Well, if we look at the townies friend group.
yes.
But then when you look at the broader
Okay, to be fair,
broader,
Ashley
narrower.
and Jasmine are very normal.
Yeah.
They are so normal. Normies. But what I'm saying
And I love them dearly. But they are so
we love
normal.
you and all, but get a little weird. I don't know. But but as an artist, I'm not that weird. I'm pretty I like to write about history. I don't know. Not interesting. Although my last story was about an unspecified apocalypse, so I guess that counts. Whatever.
There you go.
You know, whatever.
And autism.
Ugh.
All right.
Do you want to go ahead and start?
Sure, let's get the show on the road.
Okay.
Hi, you're listening to The Triad, where we're spooky but sensitive. I am Shelby.
I'm Hannah.
I'm Shannon.
Cool.
Woo.
I do have a PowerPoint for you guys. It is in my research folder.
Okay. Real quick, do we have any announcements of any kind?
Peppa bit the bottom of my foot and it's been hurting all day and there was blood in my sock and I'm mad at her.
Nice.
Great.
That's all.
Cool. Okay.
Do we have any other announcements?
I mean, by the time this comes out, this will have happened 2 weeks ago, but we're going to get rid of all of our social media except Instagram because we don't have time to run 5 different social media accounts.
Also, I just don't have the attention span for that.
That too. It's just, I don't want to.
I barely
honestly.
use social media as it is.
Yeah.
For my own personal life.
And no one really interacts with us on anything other than Instagram, so it's just going to be easier for everyone involved. So
Yes.
yeah.
I also found out that someone else I know listens to our podcast, so that's fun.
Yay. No one I know in real life still listens to the show. So, not still, they never did. At least not that I'm aware of.
Not that I have a problem with people I know listening to it. I enjoy that they listen to it, and I'm glad that they enjoy it, but every time someone's like, oh yeah, my brother listens to your podcast, and I'm like, I'm sorry, what?
I found out my dad, quote unquote, binged our podcast recently.
Oh, God.
And I was like, why would you do that to yourself?
That is.
But
no.
He works nights and needs entertainment.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Okay.
What's he gonna do? My dad is the most.
No, I know. It's just odd.
The most best dad.
Yeah, I know. It's just weird.
Out of all of our dads, Hannah's is the most acceptable to listen to the podcast.
Yeah, that's
Because he wouldn't
true.
give a shit.
Yeah, that's very true.
Where do you think I learned all these swear words?
That's true.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hannah, are you on the PowerPoint?
I don't know.
It's the only PowerPoint in her
Okay,
research
then-
folder.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, there you are. Okay, I see you.
Hi.
When you said you were covering a linguistics topic, I hoped it was this. I don't know why. I just did. I hoped it was this.
I have lots of feelings on this,
Yeah.
okay? Lots of feelings. So today we are going to be talking about African American English.
Woohoo!
Because I have lots of feelings.
Yeah.
And
wait, I have something to contribute to this, and lots of feelings, but keep going.
Okay.
Real quick too, I want to plug a much more successful podcast than ours. There's this show called You're Wrong About, and they did an episode on this. They called it the Ebonics controversy, and they interviewed a black linguist. So, yeah, it's really good. It's from April of 2019, so it's kind of high up. It's one of their earlier ones.
Yeah,
earlier.
I'm so bad about like listening to other podcasts.
Well, I just listened to them, and I just remember that was one of them.
Yeah.
They're really good, though. They're awesome.
Yeah. And just for a little background, besides like my actual sources, I did go to school for linguistics. I have a major in it, so
yeah,
I did learn a lot about this. I am not talking a whole lot about like the actual, I guess like linguistics part of it, as far as like I go a little bit into the grammar of it, but I'm not going to go into like the phonetics and all of that, just because generally speaking, people aren't going to understand it.
Yeah.
Because it's just like sound differences. So I won't be talking about that, but I'm going to be talking about like the history of it, and kind of like the social, like feelings around it, things like that. Mm-hmm. So,
and if you're worried that you don't have enough content, I have like a whole minimum 20 minutes of something I can talk about for you.
Awesome. I mean, I probably have enough content. I just didn't write everything down because I was like, this is one of those like soapbox topics for me because I've learned so much about it, and it's one of those things that like I used to have the wrong opinion on. Mm-hmm. And so now I'm just like, no, everyone is wrong. And so like I had to like rein myself in as I was writing my notes. So then I think I like reined myself in too much. So I don't know how much, because I try to keep everything that I do fairly objective, as far as like, I'm one of those people that even like when I was doing things for school, I don't like to put my personal opinion in there a lot. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so
yeah,
but I do have a lot of information. Anyway, I also have a degree in it, so I do know what I'm talking about. I promise, even if I don't sound like I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Hannah, what did you say? You were both talking at the same time.
Sorry.
No, it's fine.
I'm so excited. I'm writing down all my thoughts on a sticky note. So
I love that.
Good.
I'm pumped.
Yeah.
Okay.
But in case anyone's wondering, because I know you're not, my title slide is African American English. It's a motherfucking language, y'all. Mm-hmm. So, anyway, we want to go to the second slide. So the second slide, the map that's there is it's a like population density map, and it's for like African American communities. So as you can see, it's mostly in the southern United States, like Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, which most people tend to know. Obviously, there are African Americans throughout the entire country.
Can I just say real quick?
Yes.
Nothing I'm about to say is contradicting you. It's just my own ignorance.
No, you're good.
I didn't realize that most of the black population in the U.S. is in the Southeast until like this year.
Yeah.
I don't know why I didn't know that. I just didn't. But it wasn't until the election came up back in November, and there's all that stuff, especially in Georgia, with those issues with voter suppression. And
yeah. Well, I think part of it comes from, even though I know that like we've all lived elsewhere, like currently where we live, well, you're in Chicago now, but like where we live in Southern Illinois, we actually live in a minus our town, which is the whitest white trash ever.
So white.
The area, like St. Louis in general and like East St. Louis and all of that, is actually, we have a fairly high African American community, or like population. So yeah, I mean, and again, if you don't based off of history books, which we know are wrong,
Yeah.
it's it's an easy misconception to have,
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah.
But
Well,
yeah.
Yeah, and two, like, I mean, St. Louis and Chicago are both really heavily segregated still, too.
Yeah.
So that's part of it as well.
And most cities are,
Yeah,
actually.
it's
Most communities are.
Yeah.
Because even if you think about it, like the two high schools in Belleville, like everyone
yeah.
always called East like the black school and West the white school, and that's not
You got
true.
that flipped. The West
Did
one Yeah, West is the quote unquote black high school.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, but yeah.
Either way, I mean,
like it's not true, but it's
no, yeah.
It's
Which a lot of that is because of white people and racist housing practices. So
yeah.
Yeah.
And that was part of the stuff that like I could have very easily put that in my notes, and I kind of hint at it, but then I like started going on this whole long rant, and I was like, no, take it back a notch, Shelby. So feel free to interject, because I did take out a lot of that, but it is obviously like a big part of their lives, like in America and everything. So I don't want to like erase it or anything like that. That's not what I was trying to do. I was just trying to focus more on like the language aspect of things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway. So, African American English is what it is known as now. The way that I learned it was as African American Vernacular English, which is still a commonly used like term for it, especially in linguistics fields, but vernacular has officially been taken out of the name. It can also be called like Black English Vernacular, Black English. I think there's an African American Ventricular English. There's lots of names for it. And then it technically can also be called Ebonics. Now, the term Ebonics was originally coined by an African American. His name was Robert Williams, and he was a social psychologist in 1973. He coined the term during a conference on cognitive and language development of the Black child, which was held in St. Louis, Missouri, obviously, in 1973. Obviously, the 1970s, things were still, and still are to this day, very heavily racist. But I did kind of want to make the point that the original term Ebonics was coined by an African American. He was having a discussion with other linguists, language scholars, and researchers on like language development in African American children. However, the term is now generally used as a slur. It has a negative connotation with it because it was adopted by white people, and there was actually, I should have written this down, but it was like a movement in California back in the 80s, I believe, where it was it was like a move to create that as like its own language group in amongst children in schools. And obviously white people didn't take too well to that, and so they started using the term Ebonics in a derogatory way, and it kind of just snowballed from there. And so now it's seen somewhat as a slur. It's definitely a derogatory term, and it comes with the implication that speakers of African American English are somehow uneducated or less than. So in most like academic settings, it is called either African American Vernacular English or African American English. Cool. In my notes, I wrote it as AAVE because, again, like I said, when I originally learned of it, it was African American Vernacular English. And the shortened form of that is AAVE. I will probably slip up and say AAVE multiple times, just out of habit, but know that I am meaning African American English, and I will try my best to call it that, since that is what it is officially called now.
Do you know why the vernacular part got taken out?
I think, again, it just is the, like, connotation of it all. Like, vernacular kind of makes it sound like it's not its
Not
own
a language. It
language.
just
Gotcha.
Yeah,
okay.
it makes it seem
Yeah.
like it's just a bunch of slang words.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. So it's, and that is more, it wasn't necessarily like that part of it was seen as derogatory or anything. It's just not like the most accurate term to describe it.
Okay.
Because, and we'll kind of get into it, but a lot of people used to see African American English as just a dialect of standard American English, whereas now it is more often seen as its own separate language.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
that's more of why it was taken out, just to make it more accurate.
Gotcha. I know,
Ooh,
like...
sorry, I just ate like 4 pieces of pizza before I got on, so a little
okay.
gassy.
I know, like, nothing about linguistics other than what you talk about, so...
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I figured there was a reason. I just couldn't think of the reason myself.
yeah, no, you're good. I try to keep it as much in like layman's terms as possible, because I know that like you guys understand a lot of like English and grammar. I mean, obviously Hannah has 3 degrees in it. Like, you're just an English person, like.
And I have a degree in how to manipulate it for your own means.
So like, but I also know that not everyone, like, English wasn't everybody's best subject, so like I didn't want it
or
to
even
be
like we have like listeners who are not from the United States, or
Yeah.
English may not be their first language, and there's just a lot, you know.
Yeah. So I didn't
Yeah.
want it to be so like,
Technical.
yeah,
Yeah.
just because that's not accessible to everybody.
Yeah. For sure.
And
That's
this is something that I have feelings on, and I want it to be, the information to be as accessible to people as I can make it.
That is
basically.
not the aim of the American legal system. And I hate it so
Nope.
much.
Nor the aim of
is
the English
not.
language, period.
That too.
Yeah, that too. The English language is not exactly made to be accessible
No.
to all. But yeah, so also, we're not talking about it yet, but I do want to make a note because I know I forgot to put it in my notes. Anytime I say standard American English, what I am talking about, and this is agreed upon amongst linguists, that standard American English is like the most basic form of American English. And so if you're thinking about it, it's like American English if it didn't have any accent or dialect difference to it.
Okay.
So essentially it would be the Midwestern dialect is
Okay.
what most people see as the standard American English dialect, and that is because it is so heavily influenced by every other dialect because it's smack dab in the middle. It's the Midwest. So that we have any variations that we have are variations that are from a different dialect.
Yeah, but don't go too far north or south because then it
Yeah.
changes. You gotta be
So, like,
strict
obviously,
Midwest.
like, I'm in Southern Illinois. People are very heavily influenced by, like, Southern accents. So we say y'all, we have...
Dude, I say oil instead of oil half the time. Like, it's a problem.
Shannon,
I know.
What's it called?
And
when
tour.
You guys get on
I
a...
fucking
Yeah,
know. It's a
yeah,
tour.
I mean,
that's not a word unless
my
you're saying
coworkers the other
past
day,
whatever
like-
the fuck of ripping a piece of paper.
Yeah, my coworkers got on to me the other day because I say root beer instead of root beer.
Uh-huh.
So,
Yeah, that's
like,
weird.
I know it is, but it's the Minnesotan in me.
Yeah, I know. It's all good.
And
The
yeah,
only
so
thing
obviously...
I know...
What?
I said the only thing I know I say wrong is the liquid you drink from a cow.
Milk.
Milk?
And
I
sometimes
don't
you
Do you
say
say
Reese's.
milk?
She says milk.
Yeah, no,
and
I say that
Reese's.
on purpose and you can fuck off, Shannon.
Yeah, I know.
No, I say milk with
Dude,
a milk.
My mom
With
says
an E.
milk
With a
half the
hearty.
time.
I don't know where I got that from because...
Montana.
Yeah.
I guess.
Because
I used
it's
to
a
say
very...
flag.
It's a
I beat it out
Northwestern...
myself, though. Flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag.
Seriously, my mom does that sometimes with A's and with I, but then she also says whoosh. Like, I don't.
A, I, and E.
Putting the R thing in.
Basically, it comes from whether it depends on whether the vowel is stressed or unstressed in words, and look. There's a whole lot of nonsense linguistically that's going on there. We're not going to get into it because it doesn't really matter. But
you know, my dad's side of the family, they are so fucking Canadian. It's hilarious. All they say is sorry, 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 sorry. My grandma puts H's in WH words. So anything whipped cream, who,
what,
who, like what, where, when are you coming over? I don't know, Patricia. When you stop putting an H in the word.
My favorite thing about that is they always put the H before the W.
Mm-hmm.
When? I know. Just put it afterward where it comes.
Oh my goodness. No, my family's from Minnesota and Wisconsin, so like Wisconsin, I will say, because they're like real close to Milwaukee, so there's not a huge accent. Obviously, in other places of Wisconsin there are, but the Minnesota family, I don't know, because I don't remember them having strong accents when I was a child, and maybe they did, and I just didn't realize it. But the older I get, the more they have accents, and I'm like, when did you get so Scandinavian? Like, yeah, sure, you betcha. I'm just like, why are you like this?
I'm just happy I didn't end up with a Chicago accent, at least not a bad one. Like, yeah. God.
And my sister, because she went to college in Minnesota and then, like, moved to South Dakota. So there was, like, a good 6 or 7 years where she was Canada adjacent. And I was like, seriously, why do you talk like that now? I'm so interested to see what she talks like now that she's been in Alaska for a whole year.
Yeah.
I distinctly remember standing in line to go to lunch at, where did I go to school? Holy Spirit Catholic School in Great Falls, Montana.
Yeah.
And the idiot kid in front of me was like, oh, yeah, I had baseball against the Canadians this weekend, and they were so annoying because they kept saying, A. Isn't that so stupid, A? And I was like, and he said it unironically. And I was like, I'm such a fucking moron.
The moral of this rant is that none of us have the Midwestern dialect, specifically, that Shelby's referring to.
Yeah. I completely forgot how we even got here, so
I
glad you brought that back. Good. So basically standard American English, think if you're from anywhere that's not the Midwest, think of like a Midwest accent, but more of like an Indiana, like mid-Illinois type thing.
Actor
like
in an American movie I would assume is probably the closest.
Yeah, now that they don't use a transatlantic.
All of those bitches from Boston.
Yes, except for people from Boston who
Look,
insist
a Boston
on keeping...
accent is so hard to get rid of.
It is, that's fair. Yeah, so just think of actors for the most part.
Yeah.
Because they go to coaches to get rid of their regional accents.
Yes. They also go to coaches, which is actually a thing that a job that like speech pathologists can have is accent modification. But they go to coaches whenever they have to put on an accent for a role. So like if they're playing a British person and they're American, or if they're a British actor and they're playing an American or whatever. But yeah, because our regional differences are so strong, most actors have to get rid of them. And actually, fun fact, most military kids do not have, like, it'll come out in certain words. So like me and Hannah have certain words that we say.
Yeah, but we don't have
a fully formed accent, because it's actually called like a third culture accent, because we're known as like third culture kids. But it's because we're from like, nowhere. Yeah, you're not from anywhere, and you don't live anywhere long enough to really have that accent like ingrained in you, and you tend to like modify the way that you speak every time you move so that you seem more as part of like the in group. Yeah. Which is why I no longer have an Australian accent, because I had one until I was like 9 or 10 years old. But kids made fun of me because I lived in Florida and Florida sucks. So I made myself get rid of it, sort of thing.
I know. I was like, why aren't any of these bitches here bilingual? Because I was bilingual. Everyone at my school was bilingual when I moved from Germany to Florida.
Yeah. And
God,
I guess
going from
the
Germany
Hispanic
to
kids were
Florida
bilingual.
just sounds terrible.
I
Like,
know,
I've never
going
made
from,
that
like, the
connection.
most
I went
cultured
from
part of
Australia
Europe.
to Florida, and she went from Germany to Florida. And the moral
Yeah.
of the story is just don't move to
Sounds
Florida.
horrible.
Don't move to Florida. My friend went from Hong Kong to Florida.
Oh, God.
Oh no, Hong Kong is so
I know,
cool.
she was like, it was beautiful where I used to live. And she lived in the same town
Now
as
I
me.
live
It
in
was
a
crazy.
swamp.
Anyway.
Oh
Then you
my
moved to
God.
fucking Florida to go to high school. Isn't that the best?
God, that sounds terrible.
I had 1 year of Florida high school, and it was honestly the worst year of my life.
I can imagine.
You were also in the
I
Panhandle.
was chased down the hall.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was from the Panhandle, the Redneck Riviera. I went to the hick school. There were 3 schools. There was the drug school, there was the gang school, and there was the hick school. I went to the hick school where our colors, I swear to God, we had to wear uniforms. Camo was allowed as a uniform color because our colors
God.
were camo, whatever the fuck, green, and then that bright fucking orange that you wear when you go
Ew,
hunting.
those are
and I
horrible
kid you
colors.
not, you were totally allowed. You couldn't wear a hoodie, and you had to wear a belt.
Yeah.
You could wear camo, God damn it.
I mean, I went to a private Baptist school,
Oh, that's
That
hysterical.
was public school.
so basically,
Hate
moral of the
public school.
story: don't move to Florida. We hate on Florida so much in this
Dude, it's
podcast.
so
Fuck
easy.
Florida. They know what they did.
That's true.
Florida is
That's
the
true.
only place
They
in the
deserve
United
it.
States where the further south you go, the more liberal it gets.
It's true.
That is
Like,
true.
up high,
True.
it's bad. Down low, it's Cuba, and it's fun. Okay?
That's true.
You're not wrong.
Oh,
I know I'm right.
Oh, that's
I
funny.
lived there for 6 years.
And here I thought we weren't gonna have content.
You say that every time you don't have
I
notes,
still have my
and
whole
then
sticky note.
Yeah, that's true. I always say that because I never really like. Well, and I did my notes differently this time, so I can't even be like, oh, I have 4 pages of notes.
yeah,
So I don't even know how much I have. Anyway,
That's okay.
back to the topic on hand.
we're already at half an hour, so like, I think we'll be
Okay.
And 90% of it is hating on Florida.
Right.
good. Yeah, that's per usual.
Look, they deserve it. Okay. Anyway, so linguists are divided on like the origins of African American English or where they think it came from. There is one prevailing theory, but then you have oh my God, I got a burp. Okay. But then you have that like you know, your little faction of linguists who are like, we're gonna be contrary. So anyway, and there are multiple different theories. There's just 2 that are like the most prevalent. So the main theory is that it is, I don't want to say it's simply a dialect of English, but that's kind of like what it derived itself as. So it has, basically, it's that it's like grammar and pronunciation and phonological system were all influenced, or like they're all derived from standard English, but then it became influenced by non-standard dialects of English. So basically, it was like slaves that came over, they learned English, but then they spent so much time with like indentured servants from like Ireland or why can't I think of any other places that indentured servants were from? Poland, all the places. Anyway, indentured servants, and because they spoke English with accents from whatever their native language was, they were considered like non-standard dialects of English. And so the theory is that the slaves learned English, had their own accent from whatever their language was, and then because they spent so much time with these indentured servants from multiple different countries with multiple different accents, they adopted all of these weird sort of, not weird, but non-standard, like pronunciations, things like that.
Okay.
And then a lot most of the support for this theory is that African American English shares a lot of grammar and like phonological characteristics with rural dialects of Southern American English, which again, most of like the African American population is from slavery and was and still is to this day like heavily populates the South, and so their language is heavily influenced by rural dialects in the South. And yeah, that's the main prevailing theory, and probably most likely the one that is true. But other linguists claim that there are commonalities that tie African American English to West African languages, which again makes sense because most slaves were taken from the West African coast. And then that they have a lot of commonalities with English-based Creole languages, like the ones that are spoken in the Caribbean.
My thing has to do with Creole languages.
Oh, nice. Okay. Well, side note, a Creole language is a fully formed language as opposed to a pidgin language, which is, it's not a fully formed language. It is usually just combining like vocabulary. It doesn't really have a grammar system usually. And it's usually just combining vocabulary from like multiple different languages that meet for trade purposes. So it's a way for like these different groups to communicate, but it's not fully spoken by anyone really, and it's not a fully formed language.
Can I use this as a segue?
Yes, go for it.
This is fucking perfect. Okay, so I minored in sign language. I do not speak it, or not speak. I do not sign ASL. I am not good at it. I sign in pigeon sign, which is like a combination for me of ASL and case, which is conceptually accurate. Wait, conceptual accurately signed English or something like that. I don't really know. It's really half-assed. I'm not good at it.
Same.
Anyway, I have a degree in it. Doesn't matter. So in ASL, it's a real language, kind of like what you're saying now.
Yeah,
like it's not a
It has
pidgin
its
language.
own grammar system. It has its own vocabulary.
Exactly. So
it is its own separate actual language.
yes. So American Sign Language came from a combination of French Sign Language, British Sign Language, and Native American Sign Language, all kind of mixed together because, melting pot and what the fuck not. And so the people originally who were the signers, like all of the deaf people in America used to live in Martha's Vineyard. You know how that's like super fancy now? It used to be all deaf people. Fun fact.
I did not know that.
That is where that's where they developed their Creole language, their American Sign Language.
That's cool.
So now in American Sign Language, there are a bunch of different dialects. So there's Bolivian Sign, Burundian Sign. These all are American Sign Language. They're just a little bit different because they're dialects. Costa Rican Sign, Ghanaian Sign, Nigerian Sign, French. Why did I write over my hand? I like literally wrote the word over itself, so now I can't read it. Fuck. Something about French, African Sign, and Black American Sign Language.
Yeah.
It is a language. It's its own separate thing. Its own separate language within American Sign Language. I know a couple of Black signs, but not a whole lot. Because like I said, I'm real shit at sign language.
Same.
But anyway, I'll shut up now. Oh, and I
No,
forgot
you're
Quebecois sign.
Okay,
It's also
yeah.
Quebec sign.
Yeah, because I've been learning sign language for the last couple of months. And
Hey, hit me up. I'll talk with you.
Oh, I'm real bad at it.
Me too. We can practice.
Right. I have the same problem with it that I had when I was taking Japanese and Russian, in that like I can understand it really well, but for me to actually like, one, my hands don't listen to me because of all of my muscle issues and whatnot, but even with like Japanese and Russian, for me to take what I know. Like, I know all the vocabulary, I know all the grammar stuff, but for me to take that and like form a sentence, for some reason, there's like a disconnect there.
See, mine's the opposite. In sign language, I'm so good at signing. I know all the signs. I know all the whatever the fuck. You sign at me, and I totally freak out and blank. Except,
Okay, so we
unless
just
you're
need to go
finger
together
spelling.
everywhere.
Yeah, if someone finger spells at me, I was the best one in my class at that. Like we had to like do drills where like the teacher would sign really fast at us, and I was the only one who could keep up. And I was like, it's just like reading, you idiots.
Yeah.
Keep up.
See, I'm good with finger signing because me and my sister taught ourselves the alphabet so that we could talk in church without getting in trouble.
Oh, it was so much fun in college when my little in band was also majoring in deaf education, and we would just chit chat and sign on the band field while everyone else had to stand at attention.
Nice.
And finally our band director caught on and we got in big trouble. But, you know, we were saying things like, this is stupid, look at that idiot's haircut, I hate everyone. It was so much fun.
Also,
What's up, Cara Marie?
Side note, I think that sign language should be taught in schools.
I think
yeah, it should be.
Yeah, I think that.
Like
because
elementary
it's, like, one of the
school.
languages that children and adults and people in the United States speak and sign, and is their main form of communication.
Not only is it extremely helpful for anything, like I've had so many people like working retail, or like when I was a host at a restaurant, like it would have been so helpful because like trying to figure out what people are trying to communicate to you, and then it would just be so helpful no matter what. Like even if you aren't deaf or hard of hearing, like I think that sign language would be helpful.
Thank you for including hard of hearing, because a lot of times people forget to use that.
Yeah.
But yes, deaf or hard of hearing, big D or little d, whatever you are.
Yes.
Or HH, what's up?
Yes.
Love you, fam.
100%.
I know how to sign what's up.
I'm
I'm doing it right now, you just can't see me.
I have a question that is not related to sign language.
Yes.
It's related to terminology you're using, and I don't know what it means.
Yes.
What's crap? Now I forgot it. The phonological.
Phonological.
What
That
is
is
that?
that is the sound. Sorry, that
No,
is
you're
a
fine.
linguistic term that
Yeah.
I don't even think about. That is the sound system. So
think of like homophone sound. Phone,
yeah, so
phonograph.
it's
Okay.
like when I did the Morgan episode, and I was saying that like they have sounds in Irish Gaelic that we don't have
Gotcha. Okay.
in American English. It is the sound system and
Gotcha.
how you
Okay.
pronounce letters and things like that.
Okay. Thank you.
So again, back to our earlier discussion of like, so how Hannah says milk as milk, that E sound and that I sound are phonemes.
Okay.
And they are part of like the phonological system.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
Did
if
you know that
helps.
sign language has phonemes?
They do.
Fun fact. They do.
do.
If it's really, we only started talking about it in ASL 4, but we'd be like, if you had to say that something was big, you had to be like, ch. Like there's so many noises involved.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Because
Sign
everyone's like,
language
no,
is-
it's not a spoken language, but like, yes, it is kind of like in
Sign
ASL
language,
especially.
it's
There's
got like,
crazy shit.
yeah.
It's all your
ASL
face.
is so. That's another problem I have with ASL is that like I don't make facial expressions.
You really don't.
It's so bad because
Oh, then you can't even ask a fucking question, can you,
Yeah,
Shelby?
I
Put on
don't-
your
I
angry
can't.
eyebrows and get it done.
literally that's like been half of any points that I've gotten marked off on in my classes because they're like, move your face, and I'm like, I don't, like I just
Can't.
I don't have feelings, okay? I don't have emotions. I'm not curious. I don't know anything, okay?
See, I have the opposite problem where I have to turn off my Zoom camera so people can't see the faces I'm making at them.
Shannon, you would be
Yeah.
so good at sign language because they, like, all of my deaf friends, none of them hold anything back. You, like, walk into the room and they're like, wow, your hair looks really stupid. And, like, they don't change, they make their face exactly how they feel, and it's like, okay,
Yeah.
it like, seems
Yeah, that's
rude,
what
but
I
that's
do.
just ASL, that's sign language.
That's just
or-
how I can't
Deaf
hide
Shannon would
that.
be so good at sign language.
I can't hide that.
would.
I also talk with my hands, so having like a more controlled version of that might be good.
I was gonna say, like, I don't talk with my hands. My
Oh,
hands
God, I
barely
do.
listen to me, and I don't make facial expressions, and that is 90% of my problems with ASL. is that I was just not built for it. Okay.
Literally.
A lot of times when I talk to myself in my house, I just sign to myself. I'll be like, where the fuck did I put that stuff? Like,
I mean, I still talk to myself in
I
Japanese.
signed it all out,
so.
and right now I'm signing the sign for finger spelling, which you can't see, and I don't know why I keep doing that.
Yeah.
Because we're not on video today.
I talk with my hands so much that when we had to do oral arguments for legal writing, I did a bunch of practices beforehand because the guy I was going up against was a dickhead. And so I practiced. And so many of the people I was practicing with, which they were fellow students, they were just a higher grade than me. Not higher grade. They were further into their degree. That makes more sense. They were like,
The big kids?
Yeah, they were the big kids. They were like, you need to stop talking with your hands. And I was like, I fucking can't. Like, I had to hold on to the podium during the thing, because otherwise I would have been talking with my hand. I'm doing it right now.
Just get some of those, like, wrist weights and put them
I'm
on there.
literally miming holding onto a podium right now.
We should be on video for this episode, damn it.
I know. This should
I have lots
the
of
one.
things to show you.
I just feel like I just do it. It just helps creating a visual, you know? Like,
yeah, I don't move my hands. I don't move my face. I like barely move my mouth when I talk. So.
Oh, wait, sorry.
To be fair, I barely talk.
That's true. And I never shut up, so.
It's all good.
Hannah, are you doing something?
Yeah, I was just thinking
Okay.
of something.
Okay.
Oh god, what's her name? Hold on, I gotta find this girl's name. There's this black creator who is making all of these like YouTube and maybe a Netflix show, I'm not really sure, about Black American Sign Language.
Oh, heck
Ooh.
yeah.
Oh my god, what's her name? Oh, she's a TikTok person. Nakia Smith. Nakia probably. Nakia
Yeah.
Smith.
Cool.
Okay. I will have to
So
look
everyone look her
up.
up. She's super cool.
Yes.
We should probably actually talk about African American English at some point.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
I get very excited about Black Sign.
Yes.
Oh my god, my picture of Nightcrawler's falling off my wall.
Oh my goodness.
What happened?
Oh, man.
What's wrong with you? Okay, he's good. He's fine.
Okay,
Okay.
good.
Cool.
All
right. So, yeah, the less prevalent theory on the origin of African American English is that it was formed as a as a Creole language.
Okay.
So basically it would have started as like a pidgin language, and then probably because these people were stolen from multiple places in Africa, so they already didn't speak the same language as one another, and then they're trying to learn English as well, and so they found this way to like communicate, and it turned into over time into like a fully formed Creole language.
Okay.
Which, no, it's not the most prevalent theory, but it does have its support, and honestly the arguments for that one make sense too. So it's one of those that like we'll probably never really know. It's probably some combination of the two, honestly.
Yeah.
If it was started from a Creole language, it would have gone through this process called decreolization, which would have moved it closer to being like closer to standard American English.
Okay.
Basically, it would have decreolization kind of just makes it more of like a standard form as opposed to like all these kind of like different forms of the language, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I said, the arguments for both of the theories are pretty solid. It could go either way. And there are a few other theories for its origin, but overall those are the two that are most supported amongst linguists.
Okay.
If you want to go to the next slide, again, some more origin stuff. The map on this slide is for the... Wow, why can I not talk today? So this map is showing the Great Northward Migration of the 20th century. There's actually two, but this map is for the first one, and that's kind of like the main one, essentially. And I'll talk about that in a second. But basically, African American English has persisted to this day as its own, and I'm going to call it a language. And again, I will talk a little bit more about it later. I'm going to call it a language because I think that it is its own language, and most people nowadays do tend to agree, at least linguists, that it is its own language.
Yeah, that was how it was explained on that You're Wrong About episode, is that it's its own separate language.
And yeah, I think it's on like the next slide or whatever when I'm talking about like the grammar system on why it is its own language as opposed to a dialect of standard American English. But I will talk about that when we get there. For now, just know in my notes I have it written as like dialect / language, but I will always call it its own language because in my mind it is.
Yeah.
So it has persisted as its own language in America, due heavily in part to African Americans living in their own separate communities. And this is, I don't know what word I tried to type there, but this is due first because of slavery and then due to segregation. And even today, many African Americans still live in largely separate communities from other ethnic groups.
And that is mostly due, as I said
There's
earlier,
this
to
fun
those
thing
races.
called systemic racism.
Yeah, yeah. It's due to
that's how Black Sign Language came about too, because even when there were deaf schools, they were put into separate deaf schools. I totally forgot to say that. Anyway,
yeah,
bye.
no, that makes sense. Again, segregation, separation, all of that. Also, just random side note, African American English isn't spoken solely by African Americans, and not all African Americans speak African American English. So it is more if you are raised in that community, that is what you speak, sort of thing. So there are some white people or like Latinx people or Asians or whatever, people of color, that will speak African American English because those are the communities that they grew up in. And I would say even like our friend Jasmine, she, at least around us, I have never heard her speak African American English.
Let's call her up.
Right?
Jasmine,
like, I'm
get
not
on the
saying
horn.
she doesn't. I just, and again, she was one of
And it might have been
three.
code switching because we went to the whitest school in America.
Yeah, I was going to say she was one of 3 Black people in our entire school. So, like, it 100%. And actually, we're going to talk about code switching and how it's not actually code switching that they're doing.
Okay.
But, but yeah, so I'm not saying that she doesn't speak it. I just personally have never heard her speak it.
Yeah.
But also she grew up in the same neighborhood, or not grew up, but she lives in the same neighborhood as Hannah's family. So, like,
What's up? We're neighbors.
yeah. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so even today, most African Americans live in, I don't want to say segregated communities.
Predominantly Black communities.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I don't want to call them separate communities, but they are.
Yeah.
And again, a lot of it is socioeconomic issues and things like that. There's a whole lot of reasons for why these communities have stayed predominantly Black. And most of those issues aren't language based, and that is why I did not include them in here, but do know that they exist. And that is a large part of why their language has been able to endure to this point. And this separation of these communities has also led to a large number of in-group expressions and idioms, which is common amongst any language group. But a lot of their, like, in-group expressions, idioms, things like that, have now, with the birth of the internet and all of that, they are now considered like internet slang. And honestly, even just slang in general in America generally comes from African American English. So I'll touch on it a little bit more, but yeah. But yeah, they do tend to just, even with having their own language, they have their own, and an in-group is just like your community of people. Like you tend to gravitate towards like your own kind, I guess, if that makes sense. So like if you were to walk into like a big conference hall, women tend to sit with women, men tend to sit with men,
Yeah.
sort of thing. And that's just in the most basic terms, but people tend to form groups of like people. And that's just human nature. It's not, I'm not saying that it's like a sexist or a racist thing. It is just human nature to gravitate towards what is most familiar to you. But, and that is what forms an in-group. But, and see, now here we are getting on my soapbox. Because, yes, that's human nature, but it's our job as humans to overcome that. To be inclusive. Anyway.
Don't stick with your monkey brain. Use your
Right. Do not
reasoning
perpetuate the exclusivity and all of that. But anyway, so these in-groups, and I mean, any in-group, like any friend group, will start to form its own like inside jokes and expressions and things like that. I mean, it happens. So
Do we have an inside joke?
Hannah's entire nickname is an inside joke.
yeah, fair. That I didn't even know the origin of.
Yeah,
So
until very recently.
I'm sure we do, but I honestly can't think of any right now. Besides that,
I mean, that's one of those things that
'cause
like
you know
we
how, like, in
probably
middle school-
don't know any because like they're not. We just don't think about them being inside jokes, you know.
yeah,
Yeah, because I was gonna say, you know, like how in middle school you just say like a word, you'd be like chicken nugget, and then everyone would like burst out laughing because that was like your inside joke.
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
Oh my god, pudding. Oh
Oh my goodness.
Oh my god, like Tuesday, I had these two kids in the classroom. One is a second grader and one's a kindergartner, and they were looking at each other, and one would say hi, and then the other would go like like maniacal laugh, and then they would stop and then say hi, and then the other would go and it was a back and forth, and I was like, you need to leave the room.
Right.
Get out of here.
I can actually think of several inside jokes between me and my sister, but they're all things my mom has said, so we make fun of her for it because they were silly.
I was gonna say, me and my sister have so many, but they're all from like
They're all making
the
fun
dark
of our
ages
mother.
of the internet. So
Well, Emma and I
like
just
they're
have twin speak.
pre-YouTube things. So like
Yeah.
Although we do all have one where I'm just gonna say it and leave it. I can't even do it. Cock.
what?
That's it. That's all you're ever gonna know. Get out.
All right.
See, that's just making me
Works
think
for
of when
me.
people used to caw at me
about it.
in college. Because people
Well,
used to caw
that's
at me
stupid.
in college.
This is something entirely
I know.
different, and it has to do with some freestyle rapping, and I don't want to go into it.
Oh gosh.
Honestly,
Okay.
people calling me Condor is kind of an inside joke among people who do that. It's very outside and
It's not really a
known,
joke,
but
though.
oh no, it's not.
That's
It's
just
terrible.
bullying.
Yeah, it's fucking stupid, but like,
But yeah, so in groups they form their own expressions and idioms, and it's even just like outside of kind of like an inside joke. If you think about it, like if you spend a lot of people, if you spend a lot of time with certain people,
Shelby, that was real problematic.
I know, I'm sorry. Okay, but if you spend a lot of time around certain people, you tend to pick up on
yeah.
things that they say, like their own personal expressions, and then they kind of just become yours. Which I mean, that's how any language. Yeah, that's how any language like evolves and changes over time. So that's 100% a normal occurrence. Anyway, so the Great Northward Migration of the 20th century, which is what this map is of, and it was called that, but it was just a migration of African Americans from the southeast into other regions of the United States, and it is what helped to establish African American English as an enduring language across the entire country, as opposed to just being like a regional dialect sort of thing. And this migration of African Americans was caused mostly due to Jim Crow laws and poor economic conditions for African Americans in the South. In my notes, I put cough, racism, cough.
Yeah.
Because,
there were,
yeah.
just to expand on it a little bit, there were also a lot of, wait, did you say economic hardships? Because that was part of it too, but it wasn't, it was for everyone. Like, everyone was in an economic hardship.
Yeah, there were a lot of economic hardships across the Southeast in general. They were just worse for African Americans in the South.
Yeah.
I love this episode so far because we have the linguistics major coming in, we have the disability expert coming in, now we have the history major showing up. Like, this is...
It's a very liberal episode, okay?
It's very...
we have a lot of feelings about a lot of things.
It's very... It would be a good liberal arts course.
It would.
Bringing in so many different topics.
And I'm trying to keep it as, like, non-opinionated as possible, but some things, like, you just can't not have an opinion on it. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Like, racism is racism. So.
And this is your podcast. You're allowed to have whatever fucking...
Dude, have you heard me talk ever on this show? I do nothing
No,
but
I'm not saying... I'm just saying that me as a person, I try to keep my opinions fairly quiet, or I try not to have opinions unless I am fully informed on a situation.
You're such a Baptist.
It is. Okay, I can't help it. It's how I was raised. It was literally beat into me with a paddle, okay? But it is very much me as a person. I like to be as informed as possible before I form an opinion, and if I am not, then yes, I might have an opinion, but I'm not going to give it, or I'm going to give you every disclaimer possible that, like, I don't know what I'm talking about. This is just me speaking out of my ass.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
Yeah.
That's me on Therapy Talks with Shelby. So, but yeah, so that northward migration, and like I said, there were two of them. It technically, I guess, but the great northward migration of the 20th century literally was from like 1907 to 1980 or something crazy. So both of them are included in there. There's just, it kind of like went in two waves sort of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah. So if you want to go to the next slide, we're going to be talking about the language itself a little bit. So again, like I said earlier, I see African American English as its own language, and most, I will not say all, but most linguists will agree with that nowadays.
They are racist.
Yeah. They're, again, along with like where it came from, and a lot of it is because a lot wasn't known about like the grammar system and everything, and so now that we know more about it and there's been actual research into it, again, trying to get away from racist past, most people will agree that it's its own language, and that's why the name has changed, things like that. There are still some people who will claim that it is simply a dialect or sociolect of Standard American English, and there are fair arguments to that point that could support that claim. I'm not saying that there aren't any valid reasons to call it that. It's just that there are three basic features that classify a speaking system as a language, and they are that the language has its own grammar, its own lexicon, and it has stylistic differences, so it has its own dialects essentially, or variations based on region, and African American English has all three of those features, and so in my mind that classifies it as its own language. Also, it is a little dangerous and quite frankly degrading to say that it's merely a dialect of Standard American English, because that comes with the connotation that it is somehow derivative and that it is like the incorrect form of Standard American English, and that's simply not true because it's not Standard American English. It is its own system.
Yeah.
And so, yes, you can make the argument that it is a dialect, and that's fine in a way, but you do have to recognize that it will come with those implications.
Mm-hmm.
And so, African American English is not an incorrect form of Standard American English because it has its own rules and it prescribes to its own rules. But it does conform to those own rules correctly and uniformly across all of its variations. So within African American English, there are dialectal differences, but when you get down to the base language of it all, it is uniform. And so their grammar system is a uniform grammar system. They're, like, they might have some phonological differences, so, like, they might regionally make sounds, like, say different letters in different ways, but, I mean, the South speaks differently than the Northeast, and differently than, like, California.
Differently than the
so,
South. Like, there are different Southern accents, you know? So, and Southern ways of speaking.
Yeah, so having...
What side of the county line are you on? Because that makes a difference.
Right, so, like, having accent differences doesn't change anything. Like, the rules of the language stay consistent throughout.
Yeah.
So, just know that is why I will classify it as a language and why I think everyone else should as well, and why most people will. Like, rural African American English versus urban, those will have variations. They will sound different from each other. And like Southern African American English versus Northern and so on, like, they will all sound different from each other because essentially they are. But then again, they aren't, because they are the same language. They just have regional variations, as any language does.
Yeah.
So this is all the, like, technical grammar talk I'm going to be talking about, because it's probably the most, I guess, like, well-known and, like, easy to explain part of the grammar, and that's the picture that I put in there for you guys, is that there are tenses for how they say things. And basically it's that in Standard American English we have past tense, present tense, and future tense, and then you can have perfect past, perfect present, perfect future. In African American English, within the past tense, they can have pre-recent, recent, pre-present, and past inceptive, and then they'll have the present tense, and then within future tense, they have immediate future, post-future, and indefinite future. And so basically, they have a more complex tense system than Standard American.
Yeah, and it seems more clear, I guess. Like, it's going to be more clarifying as to when you actually did something.
Yeah, you know? And other languages have similar things, so it's not even that they just, like, added in extra tenses for, like, no reason. Like, it is common in multiple other languages, like Russian has it, and Japanese has it. But, yeah, and it's similar, like, other languages will have, like, instead of saying, like, this thing next to me, or, like, we can say, like, that over there, but in Japanese you can say, like, that right next to me, that in the middle of the room, that way over there, that over there by that person, and it's all just, like, different tenses sort of thing, or, like, different, what is the word I'm thinking of?
Context? No?
Maybe, no,
okay.
It's, like, conjugations.
Locative.
Yeah, it's just, like, different grammar, but instead of, like, in Standard American English, I had to say, like, that over there next to that person. In Japanese, it would have just been one word.
Gotcha. Okay.
Instead of the, like, 6 that I just had to say, sort of thing. That's just kind of an example of how their grammar system is different than Standard American English. And saying that they have all those different tenses makes it sound complicated, but it's not. So, like,
Yeah.
to put it into, like, examples, I'm just going to read the ones that are on this picture that's on the slide, but just so everyone listening can kind of understand. So, like, the pre-recent tense, which is part of the past tense, would have been like, I been bought it. And again, I don't know who wrote this chart, so I'm not entirely sure how accurate it is. And then, like, recent past would have been like, I done buy it, which to me it should be I done bought it. But again, I don't speak African American English, so I cannot 100% speak to this. And then pre-present is I did buy it. Past inceptive is I do buy it. Present would be I be buying it. Immediate future would be I'm a buy it. Post immediate would be I'm a gonna buy it. And then indefinite future is I gonna buy it. And like, even just these basic, I don't want to call them like basic phrases, but they are essentially like, this tense system has made its way kind of into younger generations of Standard American English speakers, because even and I don't necessarily do it when I speak, but I definitely write it out when I text. I'll be like, I'm gonna do something or whatever. And so they are actually kind of finding their way into more Standard American English, but it's more that they are influencing us as opposed to like we're making them more standard, if that makes any sense. Which again, to me, proves that they are their own language, but maybe it's just me. But yeah, so that's kind of, as far as like actual language things go. They have phonological differences. So again, their sound system will be kind of different. They have a tendency to, in linguistic terms, they have a tendency to front their consonants. So basically, like a TH sound will become an F sound. Basically, it just means they're moving it forward in their mouth. That's what fronting means. So, but again, that varies by region, and the sound systems that are around them. So those things are not necessarily consistent. It's just that there is a tendency towards fronting of consonant sounds, and there is a tendency towards unstressing vowel sounds. But again, those are like linguistic terms. If you don't know what that means, that's okay. Just know that their sound system is a little bit different.
Yeah.
And like any language, African American English falls on a continuum of dialects, which again basically just means that all the sounds vary based on where they are. They have their base grammar, their base language, base vocabulary, all of that, which will stay consistent, but things around all of that like base of the language, everything else can vary. As far as the actual like language system goes, that's all I'm really gonna touch on, just because I don't want to get too technical with it.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter unless you're a speaker of it. You don't really have to know that unless you're a linguist. Just know that it is its own complex system. It is its own language. It is not a derivative form of Standard American English. It is not somehow less than. It is actually a very complex language system. And it quite frankly is much more efficient than Standard American English.
Yeah.
If you actually, and this is why I feel strongly about it, because I have done the research into it linguistically and into the grammar system, and it is far more clear and concise and efficient than standard American English, and it's purely racism that people think that it is an uneducated form of English.
Yeah, people just assume that it's because they're misusing English, or they're like misspeaking, or that they don't understand how grammar works, and
that's not the case at all.
No.
Oh, okay.
They are
weird out of my curtain.
What?
It's not that they don't. What?
Nothing.
Go ahead, Shelby. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, it's not that they don't understand grammar. It's that they are using their own grammar system, and they are using it correctly.
Yeah.
So it's not wrong in any way. No. It's just a different language.
Which, how many white people don't use English grammar correctly?
So many
white people who think they're so fucking smart say irregardless, and it makes me want to kill myself. Really quick, I've had to take a practicum like a million fucking times. It makes me so mad every time I take it because I've already taken it. But that's not the point of this. When I took practicum this last time for teaching college composition, we basically spent 2 weeks talking about how if you teach composition with the emphasis being on grammar, you're actually just contributing to the racist system, because grammar is not like standard American English. Standard American English and standard grammar are, if you're teaching with a grammar base, you're basically telling students that any way that they write that doesn't have the quote-unquote voice of a standard American English speaker is wrong. So anything that they write in their own voice is inherently wrong, and that they are stupid and less than. So you shouldn't, like I always tell my students, just write how you talk, but like to a certain extent. Like if you're writing a research paper, you know, throw in a couple of $5 words and you'll be fine. Yeah. Like that's it.
Well, see, and that's the thing. Linguistically, it is called, and compositional writing is completely different because, again, you have like your own characters and things like that. But as far as like academic writing goes and grammar in general, there is descriptive grammar.
No, composition is.
Sorry, compositional writing versus like creative writing.
Yes. Thank you.
Sorry.
I don't hate creative writing. I hate composition.
Yeah. So academic writing, there is descriptive grammar and prescriptive grammar. And prescriptive is what I would say academic writing is, and in my opinion should be, depending on what field for sure. But like if it's like a research paper, it should be prescriptive, and that is what you would think of, like, say you're reading a research paper or an article or something like that, whereas descriptive is more how you talk.
So with
the grammar is much more fluid. It can be changed around. You can start a sentence with a preposition or whatever.
You can start a sentence with but. I hate when people are like, you can't start a sentence
with
and
that's very prescriptive.
And it's like, fuck off.
And
yes, you can.
And
it sounds nice.
Sorry. I know I literally just said I think academic writing should be prescriptive, but I don't, because I think it should be like a healthy mix of the two, because you don't want to be so casual in your writing that it comes off as like you're just having a conversation with somebody, especially if it is like a professional writing thing. But it shouldn't be so like, these are the rules and you cannot break them, because that is not how language works.
I tell my students, try not to sound like a robot, but also try to sound smart. Like,
this is fascinating to me, because I only do academic writing, and I do academic writing in a legal sense. None of this would fly. None of what you're saying would be okay. Like, we have to take...
in a legal sense, it has to be prescriptive in every possible way.
Even in history. Like, you have to write a certain way in history.
No, even with, like, linguistics and stuff, like, we pretty much had to write prescriptively, and even our professors were like, yeah, we don't necessarily agree with that, but
see, I've never
that's the way it still is in the field. Anything that's academic or professional, it has to be prescriptive grammar still to this day, and that is how you write, like, any research paper, any, like, scientific article. Like, you have to sound as smart as possible. You have to stick to every grammar rule that you've ever been taught in your entire life.
It's classist.
Oh, yeah, I agree with that for sure.
Ist. Oh, it's fucking...
It is.
What's the one?
And so there is like some pushback on it, as things,
Yes.
I don't want to say get more casual, but essentially, for lack of a better word,
Progressive.
yeah,
Be more open
but
to other forms of grammar within your writing.
yeah,
Yeah.
and again, because it's not always taught the same way across the board, that
Yeah.
it is classist, and so
Mm-hmm.
I think it does need to be a healthy mix of the two. Like, there should be some variation allowed.
We
And
had
quite
to,
frankly, prepositions can start a sentence. It's fine. It makes sense.
yeah, for
I wanted a longer pause than a comma. Thank you very much.
see, we were just told to use however instead of but because it sounds better.
That's stupid.
You know,
Fuck
like
that.
they make
No, it
rules,
doesn't.
like-
Not
just
in
heard a
every
story.
sentence. And you can't technically, if you are really looking at the grammar rules, you cannot technically start a sentence with however.
Well, that's
it
the
has to
thing,
be a
like-
semicolon, however, comma.
Yeah, no, I mean that's just what that's
No,
just what
I mean-
we were
I
taught
mean-
because they know that these rules are stupid, but they don't want to just say don't follow these rules, so
Yeah.
they give us this pretentious workaround.
Yeah, like you have to have some level of professionalism in writing in certain fields, and I understand that, and that's totally fine. But you are making it inaccessible
Oh, yeah.
for other people.
Oh, yeah.
And so if you
Do I
have
teach?
a healthy mix, then it makes it more accessible, and then it's easier for others then to take it and turn it into like layman's terms and things
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
So like for our
Like-
can I talk about my legal writing program, please? I've been trying to like 3 different times. And then we keep going off on different things.
Fine.
So every law school has some kind of a legal writing program. It's either like for some places it's only a year, some places it's only a semester. For us, it's 2 years of legal writing, and we have to do a seminar, which is a writing based class. Like we really heavily emphasize legal writing. And our first semester, we had to take and pass this really difficult grammar test. Like, I had trouble with it. And I'm not saying that because, like, oh, I'm so smart. Like, I'm just good at grammar, And it was just, God, it was so hard. And then, two, with it being inaccessible, like, I talked about this last time, I think, like, legal writing is so inaccessible to people. Like, I know so many people who still struggle with legal writing as a third-year law student because it is so counterintuitive, and like there's so much pressure to write like a lawyer, and so people overwrite, or they use words that aren't quite right, or they use words that are right but they picked the most difficult version of the word out of a thesaurus. It's stuff like that, and it's just God,
That is
it's so
why I
fucking
can't
was just
read
watching-
Aragon.
I was just watching a TikTok today about like words used in legalese,
Oh,
like
God, it's ridiculous.
wherein, and it's all those like not conjunction words, but like all-encompassing prepositions, basically.
No, there is a I'm trying to think. There's some legal document, I can't remember if it was a contract or something else. You have to start your section with wherein. I think it is contracts, because it's like where you're like listing out
because
like
you're talking
the
about the whole thing
details
is
of the contract, but it's like, yeah, you have to use that word. Like, that is required. And it just puts a huge pressure, too, on people who maybe came from a lower income background. Maybe they didn't go to a great school that had a good emphasis on standard American grammar. And then all of a sudden they're thrown
Well, and then
into
you think
this-
about anyone who has to like represent themselves.
Oh, God, that's a whole separate issue. You are treated as if you are an attorney when you're representing yourself.
Yeah.
You don't. This is a PSA because people seem to misunderstand this a lot. Like, the judge isn't going to be nice to you and do extra things for you because you're representing yourself. They are going to treat you as if you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like, which is, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, in some cases, people
Which
have to
is
represent
stupid because some
themselves.
people cannot afford lawyers, but okay.
Yeah, well, and you're only guaranteed an attorney for criminal matters. You're not guaranteed one for civil. So if you're
Yeah.
sued, or if you need to sue somebody, even if it's for custody, people represent themselves in custody cases all the time, which is a
Yeah, I
horrible
mean,
idea.
one
but
of my
like,
mom's friends, she has been representing herself. I mean, she had a lawyer for like the first 3 years, and then after that, she had like learned enough just from having to go through it so often.
yeah,
For one, her ex-husband is trash, and so they were literally in court like every other month.
Yeah.
But
there.
she had like learned so much that she had to represent herself. She was like, I can't afford not to. So
But then, you know, on top of that, our legal system is so convoluted. It's written so pretentiously and so, like, do you know how many legal cases I have read where I'm like, I can phrase this in 5 words and you put an entire paragraph on this? Like,
yeah.
And these are judges writing like this, so they make it okay within the legal field, you know, because that's where we get all of our case laws from judges. Most of whom went to Harvard or Yale or Columbia or an Ivy.
And paid their way through.
Yeah, and so they're going to be coming from those kinds of backgrounds that have a very high understanding of American Standard English and grammar, and they're going to these really pretentious-ass schools.
Also, Standard American English is not our national language.
No, it's not. Yeah,
so,
it is not.
Just saying, maybe we should not be pretentious about it.
Seriously. Like...
that's...
Like, Like, I edited some of my classmates' papers, and I'm like, dude, you're overwriting this. And they were like, I'm just trying to sound smart. And I'm like, don't. Just write it. Like, just write it. Which my professor, my first year, you have the same legal writing professor your first year at my school. He was really good about, like, especially with me, because I was writing, like, a history major whenever I first started. He would be like, it's too many words. He shortened this. No. And he was like, don't use sentence variety. No sentence variety. Just say it and leave. And I was like, oh, God, no. Because, like, in history, they're all about sentence variety and making things interesting. But for legal briefs, they're like, just get the point across and get out. It's just so different. And that's for a field that drives, you know, so many different aspects of our culture and our system. And we are allowing no differences in it at all. I hate our legal system. It's ridiculous. But, like, even for history, we, although, to be fair, the biggest thing in history is that you have to speak in active voice. You can't use passive, because passive implies that there wasn't an actual person doing anything, you know?
Yeah.
That was the big thing, at least at my program, was write in active voice.
I was going to say, so many people write in passive voice, and it always... It's... And
once
again,
you notice it, you can't unnotice it.
As someone who fully believes that descriptive writing should be a thing, anytime I see someone writing in passive voice, I'm just like, I hate everything you've ever written. Because it just, like, drives me up a wall.
Yeah.
And then they're the same people who, like, you're writing in passive voice and you explain what passive voice is, and they're like, I don't see it. And I'm like, okay.
So in that book, Speak, by Laurie Halse Anderson, there's actually a great example of active versus passive voice.
Yeah. Look, that's a great book. Okay.
It is. It's I ate the Oreos versus the Oreos got eaten.
Yep.
Yeah.
Our teacher was like, if you can put by zombies at the end of the sentence and it still makes sense, then it's in passive voice.
Yeah. Hannah, were you going to say something? I feel like you've been trying to for a while.
Sorry.
Yeah, I forgot like the first 50% of it, but yes. I don't know. Whatever, it doesn't matter. We're way past that part of the conversation.
Okay.
You're allowed to, like, yell
bring
at
it
us
back.
so you can interject.
It's just going back to teaching, and like we're too far away from it.
Well, no, just do it. Like,
we've gone on a lot of rants on this one.
Yeah, just like, I don't have that perspective. You know, I only have the perspective of being taught. So.
Yeah, so we're not supposed to teach grammar anymore. Well, no, that's a lie. We can teach grammar, but you're supposed to teach it with like a disclaimer that's like, I'm teaching you this because if you were to submit your paper to whatever the fuck, then they would be reading it based on these set of rules. However, I don't believe in these rules. I mean, that's like the wrong thing to say. Like, I believe that these rules are inherently flawed.
Yeah.
So, because they take away your voice as an individual. So that's what you say at the beginning of it when you're teaching composition. So, like, I had my students do 3 papers. The first one was a personal narrative, so like a time in their life, and I was like, you need to use your voice. I don't give a fuck. Like, there's no research involved. Don't be like putting in sources because you shouldn't have any.
Yeah.
The next one was an annotated bibliography and a thesis, so that was like very technical. And then the last one is a researched argument. So they have to make an argument, but at the same time they have to like have facts and such.
Yeah.
So that again is very technical, and for that one I'm like, you can use your voice to a certain extent, but again, you really have to, like what Shelby was saying, you have to stick to those what's it called? Prescriptive writing.
Yeah, prescriptive.
Yeah, anyway, teaching, like, I still teach a unit on grammar because I think it's important that you know what a comma splice is, because it can ruin your life.
Yeah. Well, that's
Yeah,
the
like
thing
there are
too,
certain
like,
things in grammar that I think are important, because I know people who use like a comma every 3 words, and I'm like,
Shelby, I corrected
bro.
your grammar in this, by the way. I'm really sorry.
What?
In your slide. I don't know if you noticed it.
Oh, go for it. I don't care.
That's the thing, like,
You
grammar.
got to learn some grammar, my dudes. So I put a comma because otherwise grammar would be modifying my dudes. But
Yeah, you're right.
us dudes as a separate object. So
Yeah,
comma,
you
my
are
dudes.
correct.
That's the thing,
You are
like-
correct.
Oh,
I
I
know
right? I've
all the
taught
grammar
composition
rules.
for,
I
what,
just
4
don't
years now?
do them because I am lazy. So
Grammar has its uses, but when we're
Also,
making it the end all be all, that's when it becomes the problem.
grammar has its
No,
uses
like-
because the Oxford comma is important, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, I fucking love the Oxford comma. I would die for the Oxford comma.
Same.
Anyway, wait, go back 1 second. Fuck, what were we just talking about? Oh, like in creative writing, I do not follow grammar rules at all. Like a lot
And you
of,
shouldn't, because
it's so freeing
grammar
as a
rules do not affect spoken language. It is
hell no.
literally only in written language. And it's only important to a point.
Yeah.
Anyway, we have gotten on this huge long rant on
I mean, I think it
written
was-
grammar, which is slightly related.
I think it was
but-
useful though, because even within our own, we just have such different backgrounds in writing that I think it's a good example of how grammar is stupid.
It is.
You know?
It's so
I also think we
pointless.
are all major language nerds.
I mean,
so.
yeah, that doesn't
Yes.
help, but
the sentence in my story just says, and I tell you, and I tell you. Oh, I guess that is a whole sentence, but it starts with and.
yeah.
I've
so,
written.
this one starts with so.
I wrote a
Nah,
story once upon a
and.
time back when I thought I was a decent writer, and literally the entire sentence was because, period. So,
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's a sentence. I don't care.
my academic writing brain is like, no, not allowed.
So,
The sentence just
Yeah.
says nothing, period.
well, and like my academic writing, I am so
The sentence
strict
just says
about it.
houses, period.
Oh my goodness.
Houses.
And
Oh, I
it's
forgot.
like,
I wrote this in a fucking state.
it's weird because like I have that creative writing side to me that like I can do it, but the like academic writer in me is so strong that like I can write it, but then if I read it back, I'm like, but it's wrong.
Yeah, any
So-
creative writing streak I may have had has been beaten out of me at this point. I have to write
Yeah.
academically. I can't not do that.
That makes me want to throw up. Like, for one of my classes, we have to write critical analyses every week. Didn't do mine this week. And I just
That's fair.
hate it.
Dude, I didn't go to
so
class all
much.
last semester. It's fine.
Yeah, I didn't go to. Don't tell my mom I didn't go to class this week, and I also didn't do my homework. But whatever, because the way he's grading it, I'm gonna come out with a 300% in this class. So,
Oh my gosh.
listen, there are no grades in an MFA program. You either
You're right.
learned how to write or you
you
fucking
don't.
dropped out. Like there's no
Yeah.
there's no in between.
All right. Are we done with this
Yes.
rant? Good, because I'm eating Cheerios. So anyway, you can go to the last slide.
Okay.
I don't even know where we ended, so
Just, yeah.
we're just gonna move on.
That's fine.
So here's where I'm gonna be talking about like code switching, and basically what it's gonna be code switching versus diglossia, which it's gonna come down to how you define it and how you see it. It's one of those like linguistic things that it can be either one and either one would be correct. But basically, most speakers of African American English are known for what is commonly called code switching. And that is essentially changing the way that you speak and adapting it to different environments. Whereas diglossia is that it is two different dialects or languages that are spoken by one language community, and they can switch between the two based on any given situation.
Okay.
And so essentially, whether you see it as code switching or diglossia, what African American English speakers do comes down to whether you see it as its own language or not. And how you are defining code switching. It is totally okay to call it code switching because that is kind of like the common term for it. But my linguistic heart is like, no, it's diglossia. So just know that that's what I think. But I'm going to be calling it code switching because that's the common term for it. But basically, everybody on this planet code switches. It is. So if you think about it, like how we talk to each other versus like how I would talk to my parents versus how I would talk to my boss, sort of thing. Like every single one of those, I speak to those people differently. So, and it's not even so much as like a casual versus like a professional versus like a respectful. You can kind of define it in those terms, but it's like the vocabulary that you choose, the tone of voice that you use, it's all of those kind of like external factors that play into how you speak to certain people. And everybody does it naturally. Except for, I will say, people who have any sort of like developmental like delay, or anybody who falls on the autism spectrum. Those are things that they don't necessarily pick up on.
Yeah, none of my kids can code switch. A lot of my kids can't talk.
Yeah, and that's just one of those things because they're social cues, and social cues are so, if your brain is not wired to pick up on them, like, then it's not going to, because they're so weird. They're so, you can't even really teach them. It's not something that, like, you don't teach a baby to be like, oh, you're gonna, when you talk to your boss, you're gonna be professional. Like, that's not a thing that you teach anybody.
Yeah.
It's just something that you pick up on. And so, but yeah, and so that's code switching, whereas like the diglossia, that is more, you have these two separate languages, you switch between the two, and you code switch within each language. And so that's why, in my mind, African American English speakers, and again, not all of them will switch, but I would say most, if not all, do have their standard American English and their African American English, and they will switch in certain settings. Like I've heard, like certain people that I went to school with, they're like, oh yeah, when I'm at school I have to talk white. And that's them switching to standard American English, but they will still, like, how they would talk to me in class versus how they would talk to our professors was different. And so that's code switching, but it's also diglossia because they are code switching within another language. And then when they're speaking like African American English, how they speak to their friends in their own community versus how do they speak to their parents in their own community, that's code switching. And so in my mind, it's a bit of both is what they're doing. So you can call it code switching, but it's also a bit simplistic to call it that, because they do switch up their grammar and their vocabulary. They're switching languages essentially. So it really does come down to whether you see African American English as its own language or not.
Yeah.
And I do, so in my mind. Yeah.
Yeah.
that's really all I had on that point, and that's really all I have for you.
All right.
So, but I know Hannah had talked about code switching and all of that, so I already had it in my notes, but I did want to bring it up, and I'm not saying she was wrong earlier. I'm just saying it's a little bit on the simplistic side.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
I get it. I'm a simple bitch.
No, you're good.
I don't know anything.
And you weren't wrong.
Name one thing
You were
I
just
know. Nothing.
Yeah, you weren't wrong. It's just based off the information that you have, and like I said, I went through like 6 years of
This
language.
kind of stuff.
Yeah. But if you couldn't tell, I am passionate about language. Hannah is passionate about language, and Shannon is passionate about language, but all in different ways.
All in very
because
different,
we all learned
conflicting
it
ways.
differently. And language is a very complex, ever-changing thing. Basically, the first thing you learn in any linguistics class is that language is fluid and it changes over time, and nothing in it is consistent. And so for you to sit here and say that one thing is the most correct thing to do and you cannot ever stray from that is 1,000,000,000% incorrect. You cannot say that. And just because someone speaks differently than you does not make them uneducated. It just makes them different.
Just makes them bilingual at that point. At least in this context.
Yeah. And if someone speaks African American English, they are not uneducated. They are not inherently wrong in any way. They just speak a different language than you. And quite frankly, they speak a better language than you.
Like my dad said, black people are just cooler.
They are. And yeah, this is something that I feel strongly about because, like I said, I used to have the wrong opinion about it because I lived in the South for too long and I grew up very white.
Well, I didn't live in the South, and until, pretty recently, I think that's part of it too. Until pretty recently, African American English wasn't presented as anything other than incorrect English.
Yeah.
I think that's part of it
and
too.
Even in mainstream media, it's still not presented as anything other than incorrect.
Yeah.
And so because it's something that I feel strongly about, I wanted to touch on it. Also, I saw a thing on Facebook about it the other day, and by that I mean like a month ago, and I was like, I'm going to talk about this on the podcast. Mm-hmm. I'm going to get on a soapbox because I'm a linguist, and I'm going to do it.
I mean, I think my next topic is going to be a soapbox thing too.
Yeah.
But
like, language is just one of those things that a lot of people have biases that they don't know that they have about it, because it's one of those things that it's internal. You don't even really think about it. You don't, like, I never really thought where I was like, oh, someone speaks like that and I think they're uneducated, but I did think that, like, unconsciously. And so it's one of those things that, like,
it's just an implicit racial bias.
Yeah, and so it's one of those things
not
that,
just, but you know what I mean.
if it helps anybody by me pointing out that it is its own language, it's its own language system, it is very complex, it is correct. If that helps anybody be a better person, that is what I would like to do, because it made me a better person to learn about it. So and I'm all about people learning and growing.
Yeah, it's all good.
And that's all I got for you.
Okay, yay. This was very informative and ranty, but that was mostly because of us, so...
I'm sorry if anybody found that boring, because it's just me talking about a foreign language.
Pretentious. I'm sorry if we came across as pretentious. That wasn't the plan. That's just how we are as people.
We're just very language-based people, okay? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I know that I am very passionate about linguistics and languages and stuff like that, and it's not everybody's cup of tea, and that's totally fine.
Yeah, they can skip a week.
Yeah,
but
I love everything to do with language and grammar systems and, like, linguistic stuff, so obviously I majored in it, but but yeah, so I'm sorry if you found that boring, but I find it very interesting, and there's got to be someone else out there who does, so
I think it's interesting.
To the 3 people who will find this interesting, thank you.
This one's for you. Sorry, it's not like spooky or paranormal or true crime or whatever we normally do, but it's our podcast and I'll do what I want.
Do you know what's spooky?
Racism.
Racism.
We're kind of a I don't know if we can even, we're more like in the miscellaneous category at this point because we just cover the most random shit.
You know what's a disaster? Because our description does say we cover
Yeah.
disasters. You know what's a disaster?
Us.
The English language.
Yeah.
Yes. It really is. It's so messed up.
I'm trying to send this picture to you guys that I drew in college.
Oh.
In my master's degree. It's about standard English grammar.
I can send you every PowerPoint ever on the topic if you want them.
No, because do you know how many I have?
Probably the same amount.
Too many.
Let's fucking fight about it.
Please don't fight about grammar again. Or about language
Shannon's
again.
like, Shannon's like, can Shelby and Hannah just please stop fighting?
Calm the fuck down.
Sometimes it seems
It's
like
just because we're so passionate.
you are. It kind of
about the
seems
same
like
thing.
you two are trying to like outsmart each other, like, and not outsmart as in trick, outsmart as in like out intelligent each other on the topic. That didn't happen this time, but it's happened in the past.
I think we're just so passionate that we're like, but I have a point.
Yeah.
And then the other one's like, but here's mine. And it's like we're fighting on the same side about the same thing. We're just yelling at a mirror at each other.
I was going to say, we're
standing
basically
on
the
side
same
of the
person that we have nothing to actually fight about, but we fight.
Don't.
It like makes no sense.
It really doesn't.
It's okay.
That's okay.
Do you see what the book says, Shannon?
Hang on.
The books?
I'm pulling it up. Hang on. Yes.
Can we end this?
Yes, we can end this.
So our ending is that we have no ending. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, thanks, bye. Thanks for listening to The Triad. Our music is by Scott Buckley. Our audio is recorded by our sound engineers, Craig Bott and Audrey Credo.
If you like the show, please rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also follow us on social media. We're on Instagram, YouTube, and Tumblr as The Triad Podcast.
We're also on Patreon as The Triad. Currently, all Patreon funds will go towards the cost of hosting the show. Each tier has its own rewards, but every patron receives our undying gratitude. Do you have comments, questions, or stories? Email us at thetriadpod@gmail.com. And thank you again for listening to The Triad, where we're spooky but sensitive.